Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time you're viewing this podcast. This podcast series we call Race, Culture, and the Church. Race, Culture, and the Church. It was begun 1 week after the murder of George Floyd, and we've continued up until this point, this spring/summer of 2024. And so I invite you to go back, look at our catalog of podcasts of different individuals that have come into this space. And I think you will be helped and blessed, if you will. Race, culture, and church, those are the areas we want to touch on. 2 out of 3 pretty much is a guarantee. 3 out of 3, we hit that with great frequency. So we'll see how we do today. So I am pleased. Once again, for the third time, this trifecta now, I have in our space the chief of police for the city of Sacramento, the capital of the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world, Chief Kathy Lester. Chief, welcome.
Good to be here again. I can't believe it's been that long already. They're my third time getting to see you.
This is the third time. Our paths crossed briefly at different events, but to actually have you here to have a dialogue is really an honor. You've got a million things going on. And so to carve out time to be in this space in our Oak Park community, I really appreciate it. So I don't, questions aside, I appreciate you carving out time to be a part of this conversation.
Well, thank you for taking the time. You always ask very thoughtful questions. And
I hope so.
I wouldn't miss it.
Yeah, they say a broken clock is right twice a day too. So we'll see what we can do. But this is the third time, as you mentioned, and I was just reflecting that it's been since February 1st of 2023. It's been a year and some change now since you've been here. You took office in 22.
Yeah.
What month?
Well, technically it was like the last day of 2021, but
okay.
I kind of count one day.
So January of 2022.
Yeah.
And so you came in here in November, and then a year later, you came back. So I appreciate that. So catch us up. Give us a 30,000 foot view. What has transpired besides everything since February of last year to now? And one of the questions my father would ask couples when they were married, after they had gotten married, if you knew then what you know now, what would you do different?
It's a great question.
So I'm going to throw that at you. So now that you know what you know, you didn't know it back in February of last year. What has happened? Where's Chief Lester?
Yeah, a lot has happened, on sort of the operational side of things and what we do. Every chief comes in and has a plan, leadership plan, a vision, someplace they want to see the department go in order to better serve the community, because there's not a roadmap. If there were, wouldn't that make our jobs a lot easier? Like, okay, these are the 5 or 10 things that you need to do, and you're dialed, because things change a lot. I mean, your community changes, the challenges you face change, and things become more significant sometimes, and then you're able to, manage things differently too. So last time I spoke, when I took the job, violent crime was really, and still is, at the forefront of what I thought was really important to address. And seeing what works, I know we have a community of great community-based organizations, people that want to see a difference. And I know law enforcement is a piece of that, but it's not the answer. And when we came into the job, because it wasn't just me, it was really an entire team of new leaders and new command staff. Number one, we had to figure out, how do you run a police department in an effective way internally, but 2, externally, how do you deliver on the services that you want to provide? And we had seen multi-year increases in violent crime, in particular gun violence and homicide, to really an almost all-time high right before I took the position, or really was appointed to the position. It's really an honor. And we knew we had to do something about that. So the last time we talked, there were certain things that were important to me. One, making sure that we engage our community partners and that we leverage city services, as well as have a very strategic, enforcement plan and protocol. Because, and I've said this many times, not one of us can do it alone, right? The community can't be expected to solve all of our problems. Law enforcement can't, nor can the city. It's really a shared responsibility. And the topic of gun violence is really important to me because I see what kind of harm it does in our community. And not just physical and emotional harm to the people that are involved, but it very much impacts people's sense of safety. Children, when they're going to school, don't perform as well. There is a lot of fallout from gun violence that occurs in maybe, just a very small portion of the community, that greater community. And I can say that, I'm fortunate to have been here for 30 plus years and have watched this, pretty awful cycle, for years and years. And in the end, you have people that are physically harmed. And so to me, that had to be our number one priority. There's a really good book. I may have mentioned it before. And this gentleman's become, I would say, a friend, Thomas Apt, who wrote the book Bleeding Out. And he talks about this scenario where you have a young person that's brought into an emergency room. And there would be all sorts of things and challenges. Maybe they don't have a job. Maybe they're homeless. Maybe they came from a home that just has a lot of challenges, but they're there and they're having a medical emergency. They've been shot and they're bleeding. So the very first thing that you have to do is stop the bleeding, which means that you have to stop the extreme violence that you see, and then also start addressing these other factors that lead into it. So for us, creating a partnership with the community was really important. I wasn't really sure how I was going to be able to do that. I know that we have great partners, but being able to bring them together for a common vision. And then also for our side internally, how we were going to change the way we did things at the police department so that we could be the most effective. And then, the shooting at 10th and K happened. And that was, for my career, the largest mass shooting that we've had since I began working here in the early 90s. And one, extremely tragic. You're seeing on the news right now, we're just getting into the legal proceedings. But that was such a widespread event that, the entire community was not only talking about it, but they were affected by it and wanted to see a change. And so for us, I knew that was a time that we really needed to act and make a difference. And so we piloted this program, but I think there were some skeptics, honestly, and I'm not sure what I could have done to change that, because there's this perception that community violence interrupters and community prevention workers should be very separate from the police, and I think that's just not my personality. I'm much more of a collaborative, bring everyone to the table. We have a problem, let's solve it. But politically, that can be a challenge because, you certainly don't want to influence or keep people from doing the work that they're really trained to do. So some of the criticism was that, if we bring all these community organizations, in with the police department, is the police department going to dictate what they do and how they do it? And all I could say was, no, and you'll have to wait and see, and we won't. And actually, we've created a great partnership. At the time, it was with 8 community-based organizations, and we did a couple of things that I thought were really important. One, we really worked on prevention and trying to intervene before any type of violence happens. In the year that I took office, we had about 600 shootings across the city. And at most, that's 600, people that are involved as shooters in our city of 525,000 people. Most of our violence is concentrated in very small geographic areas.
3 areas, I think you said.
Yep, Del Paso Heights, parts of Oak Park, and Valley High Meadowview. About 7 square miles of our 100 square mile city. When we broke down the data, showed that's where about half of our gun violence occurs. And so you can be very strategic in the people that you're working on helping, because what we want to do is try and break that cycle of violence.
So if I can step in just for a second. So I'm hearing gun violence as a theme, if your focus is a pie, like metaphors and analogies and all that good stuff, if your focus is a pie, how big a slice is gun violence?
Are you talking about everything I do as a department?
From the enforcement side.
The enforcement side of things. Well, I think it's certainly a priority. I don't know it's as a huge piece of the pie as most people would think, but I think it's strategic. So right now I've got 6 priorities that are really important to me. Outward facing, I would say it's reducing violence in our community. That includes gun violence. Also trying to do everything we can to support the work of the incident management team, which is addressing homelessness. And then community outreach and engagement is also a big piece. So I think for our external priorities, it's about a third of each of those. And then internally, really working on a couple of things that are important to me, making sure that we meet our mandates. We have a lot of unfunded mandates, whether it's auditing, reporting, transparency efforts, and making sure that we are leading from the front on those. Also, financial and fiduciary responsibility is extremely important to me. And then employee wellness and welfare. And so I think I kind of look at it as two pies, an external pie and an internal pie. And if you had to really kind of break down where we're putting our efforts, it's in those 6 different areas.
So with the efforts for, again, the enforcement efforts to reduce violence, it's a good thing. Nobody wants violence. But that's from an enforcement side. From the prevention side, you spoke about outreach.
Yep.
Give me, I don't know, how big a slice is the prevention side versus the enforcement side?
Sure, they go hand in hand. And so a couple of things. So enforcement has to be, you've got to be very focused on that. There was a time, and I don't think this is a surprise to anybody, and certainly not in law enforcement or to communities that were impacted by violence, that the way law enforcement responded to an uptick in violence was literally to saturate an entire community and stop everybody, right? And people went to jail and you got guns, but it wasn't particularly thoughtful, wasn't strategic, and it certainly created a lot of harm in those communities that we were trying to help. That's the irony. And we need to change how we do that. That's not really the strategy that should be employed. And over the years, I think law enforcement is changing their approach. They certainly should. I know we're doing it differently here because, why are you going after everyone in a community when most people have no involvement in violence? And as a matter of fact, they're negatively impacted by violence in certain ways. So you have to be very thoughtful, and that takes planning, that takes a lot of intelligence and data to make sure that you are focusing your enforcement efforts on the people that are truly involved in crime. I mean, honestly, I'd love to be able to intervene in all these situations and keep people from being involved in any kind of violence or crime. That would be ideal. Now, I know the human condition is that that's not possible. We are going to have to respond. We are going to have to react. But how you do that, there's a lot of different ways to do that. So now, for example, we have kind of moved from our enforcement teams to a violent crime reduction team. And those teams base their work on intelligence-based policing, which means we use a lot of data. We use a lot of, pieces from reports. We don't just, blatantly go out and saturate areas, But
that would be enforcement that's stopping a crime before a crime happens.
Yes.
I guess I want to step back even one step further, stopping the thought process to even get into that path of committing a crime.
Right. How do you do that?
Well, I've got some ideas, but how is Sac PD doing that?
Well, I think first of all, we recognize that people need to have a support system and they need to have access to a job, right? But that's not.
But you're not an employment agency.
I'm not an employment agency.
Although you would I'm sure you would. This might be a good opportunity to put out a PSA to, if you need a job, come work for the Sac PD.
We do, and I'm doing a lot with youth on that. But I think that there's other organizations that do it better, and that's where you have to realize that's a better role for someone else. But we certainly. I've always thought about this because I think our members, whether you're sworn or non-sworn, we make contact with people every day that need some kind of help. You don't call the police department when things are going real well in your world. And for a long time, I've thought there's got to be a better way to do this. We see people in need. How do we connect them with someone that can really help them in the long term? I sometimes see the police department and our response to calls as almost being like the emergency room. But people need primary care physicians. They need that preventative care. They need the ongoing maintenance. Certainly we fill a very important role. But I think when you're looking at making long-term changes, a lot of our community members, I'll give you an example. Nikki Whiteside, right out here in Oak Park, is one of our providers. She's the director of Helping Our People Eat, HOPE. And Nikki, one, is very well connected. You know, she lost her son to gun violence a number of years ago. And as a mother, that's really hard for me because I see this, you know, in the community. I can only imagine how hard it is and what you have to go through, not just, you know, at the time of the incident, but just the loss of, you know, your child. But she has done an amazing job with a construction program and bringing people from the community that may be vulnerable in a lot of ways to giving them real skills and a real job. And, you know, and being here in the community, she can relate to our community members in a way that maybe we can't. And so
how do you support that in terms of, you know, so again, I'm trying to get to SAC PD. What is SAC PD doing to help steer folks to Nikki's program?
It's a great question. So we have built a really great partnership, not with just Hope, but with a number of other organizations. And so there's a couple of things. One, because we do find the need, we try and find people that can help meet that need. And so we have regular standing meetings with all of our providers. We have a referral process where if we think someone can be helped by these programs, that we actually refer people over and do follow-up. We go and do home visits. And we had to build trust, though. That didn't just happen overnight, right? That wasn't something that came easily. We really had to work at it, and we had to have faith as a police department. Our community organizations had to have faith, and we all knew we were going in the right direction. What's also really important to me is that for a long time, you know, we provide grants as a city, and very important to do this, but we'll typically do 1-year grants. And if you've done work in this area, you know it's really difficult to do a 1-year program, right? You just, at the beginning, you get your grant, and then you start to, you know, staff it and, you know, kind of build your program. And then before you know it, the year's almost over and you're having to kind of scale back down, you know, let people go. And the work that we're doing is so important and so long-term. I really pushed for a multi-year grant program for our providers, which isn't something that's very typical with government agencies. But last year, we were able to show the effectiveness of this type of program over the course of the pilot year and really push and be successful. Thank you to our mayor and city council who support this in giving us a 3-year grant program.
And for so, how much of the grant awards, I mean, what was in aggregate? The amount? Yeah,
so we have we actually got an additional $1 million, which was great. But we had $950,000 the first year. Then it went up to over $1 million this last year. We added an additional $1 million to it. It's about $3 million a year
over 3 years.
Yeah, and so every year, and so if our providers are doing good work, you know, we can renew their grants and move forward. And that, to me, that gives a lot of stability to our providers, but also stability in our communities.
So now one other area I want to touch on, and I know we're going to run out of time before we finish up where we're going. Budget's an issue.
It is.
Federally, state,
sure,
now locally. And so I'm hearing $3 million, you know, for prevention. Just use that word for prevention. Over 3 years, $1 million a year. Total budget for the SAC PD is how much?
We were 228, and then 227 was our actual.
Say that again?
It's kind of confusing. Okay. We were authorized, and there's what our actual. It's between 227 and $228 million a year.
That's $1 million. That's a very meager amount, but again, that's enforcement versus prevention. So the budget.
Right.
So where are you with respect to enforcement, prevention, all of those things? Folks in the city of Sacramento are going to be able to rest easy that SAC PD is funded to the level that needs to be in order to provide safety and response.
So the city budget's about $1.5 billion. And as everyone has heard this year, we have about a $66 billion shortfall, and that's significant. The good news, I would say, is that's not due to a recession. That's due to a revenue and expenditure challenge. And this is not an insurmountable problem, but we have some structural deficits within the city. We have a lot of labor costs. Certainly the police department's no exception. 92% of our budget goes straight to labor and just paying for, people to come to work. And
90% of your budget
over 90
is labor costs.
A lot of people don't recognize that, the significance of that. We don't have a lot of programs that we run. We're mostly people. We have about 1,100 employees that serve a multitude of functions that most people don't even realize. And we're one of the largest, city departments. So we take up our fair share, for sure.
So again, I'm, the engineer in me. So 10%. So basically $25 million is what you have for overhead, non-personnel costs.
We have a number of fleet costs, and we do have overhead for services and supplies, for sure. But it's and then
that's a very meager amount.
It doesn't leave a lot.
No.
We really have to adjust. But I think anyone knows, it's no surprise, labor's gotten really expensive. Not just within government, but just across the board in the state, and we're no exception to that with the city. So, I really commend the city because during COVID, the challenges that our small business owners faced, the challenges that our city faced when people couldn't open their doors, we were the recipient of federal funding, and that federal funding went to really try and take care of the people of this community. I just gave an award. I was honored to be able to present an award to Mr. Ernesto Delgado, who for his work at La Cosecha, which is this restaurant right in the middle of Chavez Park. And and he's done a number of other restaurants, very much giving a person back to our city. And he said, and this is a guy who's worked very hard his whole life. He said that the pandemic was the most challenging thing he was ever through. It was the hardest thing he ever had to do. So I'm glad that the city was able to divert a lot of that funding to people that really needed it, to a lot of our community members, did a lot of great programs. And now we're having to sort of rebalance that and figure out as we move forward. Now the city, can certainly provide core services. We're able to do that. And there's a lot of things that we will be able to continue to do. So the city manager has offices proposed. It came out on April, I guess it was just last week. The proposed city budget came out, and there's a number of reductions. There's some reductions in vacant positions. There's some rebalancing. Right now, the essentially proposal is to use about half of one-time funding strategies and about half ongoing strategies. So that's
for your department or for
citywide,
the city?
Citywide. We're all looking at this as a city.
So I'll translate that to my understanding. So we'll cut to get about $35 million in savings and kick the can down the road for the other $35 million.
I think that I'm not a budget person, obviously, but it can certainly be seen that way. But I think there's a lot of unknowns. There's a conversation, about funding for to support our homeless population. We don't really know where our revenues are going to be. Certainly, there's indicators that things are changing in a positive direction, which is good. I think. As Peter Coletto, our finance director, has said, that if this were a recession, this would be much more significant. Not that this is not a significant problem, but this is not insurmountable. And we're able to make some changes, certainly within our department. For me, focusing on core services and be able to provide an effective response if you call 911 is key. But it's also making sure that we're supporting our youth. It's making sure that we're supporting our schools. It's making sure that there is follow-up to those initial calls so that there is justice can be served for the victims of crimes. And it's certainly prevention as well. So it's not just the one piece. And I think certainly the city manager's budget is very practical, makes a lot of sense. We all across the board made some changes, took some reductions so that we could continue to provide services. And what I think is important to note is that the city manager was very clear that he wanted to focus on the priority of our community, which includes really top top of the list are homelessness and public safety, followed by deferred maintenance. People want to make sure that the drinking fountains work, that the parks get mowed. They want to make sure that we're dealing with this, and working towards finding solutions on this very difficult challenge we have with homelessness.
So the one person you cited, the budget person, said that he feels optimistic coming out of this. How optimistic are you with respect to, as we look forward, the budget, programs?
Yeah.
Where is Chief Lester taking Sac PD, Sacramento?
That's a great question, because I think this is how you see the world, right? Is the glass half empty or is the glass half full? I'm a glass half full person in a world where it's very easy to look at things like the glass is half empty. If I focused only on our problems, only on our challenges, we would never be able to move forward. It's not to say that you don't pay attention to them, because you certainly do, right? But you don't let challenges and problems hold you back. You look at challenges as an opportunity and how you do things better. So when something isn't working well, instead of just being like, this is just what we have to deal with, you find a way to work around. I'll give you an example, our hiring. So it's been tough to attract people to the profession of law enforcement. And I would say other jobs as well, whether it's teaching, whether it's emergency services, medical profession, it's just been tough to get, people into service jobs. And there's a lot of reasons, probably unique to all of our professions. The bottom line is that when we have been trying to hire police officers, we have almost 100 vacancies right now. We're able to kind of maintain our current staffing, but we'll hire, we'll put a group into the academy, and then we'll have a group retired. It's just kind of maintaining the status quo. So it's not that it's not working, but I think we could do things better. And, when you talk to people in the community, and you talk to people that want to be in this profession, there's a lot of folks that would love to work in some aspect of public safety, but maybe they don't want to be sworn, but it's not a lot of opportunities there, right? So a couple of things that we've done differently. We've really expanded our student trainee program. So that is the entry level. You're a young person looking to, right out of high school or college, and you want to get into the job. It really gives you on-the-job training, but it's a paid position. And I know how hard it is for kids to get classes. I have a 19-year-old who is in our local community colleges here, and both my daughters have graduated, and it has gotten more and more challenging. So we work really hard around the student schedule to support them and to make sure that we're managing their work, and they have a focus on school, and they're getting that on-the-job training so they can be our next generation. Our other group is community service officer, and that was a position that we lost a number of years ago with the recession, but we've brought back, and we're asking to bring back in even a different form with this budget. So we're asking to actually swap 7 police officer vacancies to create 10 of these new positions. And essentially, it's a non-sworn position that works in our community. They, if you're in patrol, you'll see these folks, and they take, kind of the lower level reports, but they also have a real key role in doing follow-up and investigations, and some work that it takes a trained professional, but maybe you don't necessarily need to be sworn. We're using some of our funding as well to help create job opportunities for people. Like, you probably know this, but we have 5 magnet schools at our comprehensive high schools. And typically, the magnet schools, we've got over 600 kids in those programs citywide right now. And I'm very happy to report, they've had 100% graduation rate. And typically, these are a lot of at-risk kids that have challenges. And so to be able to boast 100% graduation rate is amazing. And we were, it occurred to me that we've had a hard time when we bring people in with driver's licenses. So we actually polled our magnet school academies and asked high school sophomores, juniors, seniors, if they had, if we were able to provide an opportunity for them to get a driver's license, would that be beneficial to them? And I can tell you 100% of the kids at Grant and 100% of the kids at Hiram said yes, absolutely. Because if you've sent a kid through driver's training lately, you know how expensive it is, right? And that's an opportunity that we can provide. So we're starting very small, but we're working on an online program to help our students that are in that program get their driver's licenses. And then we'll work on doing the driver's training, because I think that that's a key piece. It's almost one of those things that you absolutely have to enter the workforce. And those are things that we can use and allocate some of our youth funding money that comes through, like asset forfeiture, for example, to support those programs. So a lot of good work being done.
That is awesome. I've already gotten the high sign a couple of times that I am over budget. Speaking of budgets, on time. Chief Lester, you'll have to come back. It can't be a year from now, but you'll have to come back. But I guess I just want to ask in closing, do you still feel like I am making change? I am the right person for this job right now, and I'm enjoying the ride.
I think that I am still the right person, but I also think that I have the right team with me. It's not any one person. I think we've all been like this, where you've gotten to something, you're so passionate, you believe so much about it that you just want to see certain things through. We're in year 2 of our public safety partnership grant. We're making incredible strides there. I'm really excited to see the impact there. And I know our budget's a challenge, but that's also an opportunity to do things in a different way. And having a team that believes in that and is willing to go along the journey with you and see what we can be capable of and what's possible is a huge benefit. And that's really what keeps me going every day, is that you're doing good work, you're making a difference, and you have a team that wants to do it with you, So for as many things that you hear, when you watch a lot of news reports, it's very easy to get down. But I also think that it's more important to see these windows where you can do things differently. And this is a big transition time, a tipping point over the last few years, I would say, in law enforcement. And you need to have a group of leaders. I can certainly speak to a lot of my fellow peer chiefs that are learning chiefs that are looking to do things in a different way and have this great opportunity before them to see how law enforcement looks and what changes we get to make for everyone's good, including our own.
That's awesome. Thinking as you were just speaking, I was thinking again, you're what you said, you're a glass half full person. Someone shared with me not too long ago, I'm just happy for a glass. I just full, empty, whatever. I've got a glass. There's potential right there. So I see a whole lot of potential. Maybe there's a whole lot of potential yet to be lived out. Sometimes it's budget, sometimes it's choice. But I appreciate you. I appreciate you in the role. Everybody can armchair quarterback and say, well, you should have done this, you should have done that. But someone has to be in the position to do the work at this time. And I appreciate you being willing and still a steady hand on the wheel to do what needs to be done for our community. So Chief Lester, from Mark, City Church, Oak Park community, thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you, Pastor Meeks. It was great to be here again today. Thanks for having me.